In the biting chill of early November, Emma Collins pressed her back against the towering pine that bordered the narrow dirt path winding through the dense forest. Her breath came in ragged puffs, each exhale clouding the crisp air before fading into the shadowed underbrush. The heavy swell of her pregnant belly made every step a calculated effort, each movement slow and deliberate. She clutched the worn strap of her backpack tighter, a feeble shield against the cold and uncertainty that gnawed at her resolve. For weeks, Emma had wandered the outskirts of town, drifting farther from the crowded streets and cold shelters that offered little comfort or safety. The approaching winter cast a long shadow over her prospects, and the gnawing fear of where she might find refuge grew with every sunset. The forest, once a place of childhood adventure and fleeting peace, now felt like the last bastion between her and the biting despair of the world she had lost. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Her eyes scanned the dimming light through the skeletal branches, searching for anything that might offer shelter. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, her gaze caught on a small structure barely visible among the trees. A cabin, worn and weathered, its wooden walls cloaked in creeping moss and faded paint. It stood in quiet defiance against the encroaching wilderness, a forgotten sentinel at the forest's edge. Emma's heart quickened despite the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. The thought of a roof over her head, even one so clearly abandoned, sparked a fragile hope. The last threads of warmth clung to the air as she stepped forward, the forest floor muffled beneath her tired boots. The cabin's door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze, as if inviting her in despite years of neglect. She hesitated only for a moment, memories flashing unbidden. The last eviction notice clutched in her trembling hands, the cold indifference of landlords and strangers alike. But the sharp pang of hunger and the relentless ache of her body pushed her onward. With a cautious breath, she crossed the threshold into the shadowed interior. The cabin smelled of earth and old wood, a faint hint of lavender lingering in the air, despite the dust motes dancing in the fading light. It was bare, but clean in its own forgotten way. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, and the fireplace, though cold and empty, offered a promise of warmth she dared to imagine. Emma sank onto a rough-hewn bench, her back against the wall, closing her eyes briefly to steady her racing heart. Outside, twilight deepened, wrapping the forest in a cloak of blue shadows. Inside, a fragile stillness settled, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leaking roof. Emma's thoughts drifted, memories pushing through the fog of fatigue, the life she had built and lost, the man who had left when he learned of her pregnancy, and the mounting bills that swallowed her paychecks like a ravenous beast. She traced a trembling hand over the rough wood beside her, the reality of her situation pressing down like the weight of the sky above. Homeless, alone, and with a child on the way, Emma was a fragile ember in a world that seemed eager to snuff her out. Yet, in this abandoned cabin, amidst the silence and decay, a tiny spark of hope flickered. Night fell fully as Emma settled against the wall, the cold seeping through her thin jacket. She wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering promises she barely believed, promises of safety, of warmth, of a future. The forest outside grew still, the dark pressing close. But inside the cabin, beneath the weary weight of her fears, something stubborn and unyielding stirred. As the stars blinked awake overhead, Emma allowed herself a single, tentative breath of relief. Here, in this forgotten place, she might find a sanctuary, however temporary, as the harsh winter loomed and the world beyond continued to turn indifferent. The path ahead was uncertain, but for now, this cabin was her refuge, the fragile beginning of a story yet to unfold. The firelight flickered weakly against the cabin walls, casting long, wavering shadows that danced in time with Emma's restless thoughts. She sat on the rough wooden floor, knees drawn close to her chest, the cold seeping through her thin clothes, despite the small blanket she'd managed to keep wrapped around her shoulders. The faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, mingling with the musty odor of aged wood and forgotten years. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the chill of approaching winter, a reminder that time was slipping away faster than she could grasp. Emma's mind drifted back to the life she had left behind, a life that now felt like a distant dream, fragile and fading. Just months ago, she had been living in a small apartment on the edge of town, working part-time at a bookstore and dreaming of something more stable, something permanent. Her marriage to Caleb had been a quiet unraveling, a slow fracture beneath the surface of smiles and shared routines. When the pregnancy came, it was meant to be a new beginning, a fresh chapter to rewrite their story. But instead, it became the final fracture. Caleb had left shortly after the news, unable or unwilling to face the responsibilities that awaited. The empty apartment echoed with his absence, the silence growing heavier with each passing day. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, unopened and threatening. The landlords were patient for only so long, their kindness worn thin by missed rent and broken promises. Eviction notices came like cruel reminders, slipping under the door when Emma was at her lowest, each one a dagger to her fragile hope. Her world unraveled quickly after Caleb's departure. The bookstore job, once a lifeline, became untenable as Emma's swelling belly made the long shifts unbearable. She exhausted her savings on doctor's visits and groceries, then on the bare essentials she could scavenge from thrift stores and food banks. Friends drifted away, uncomfortable with her new reality, or perhaps unable to bridge the widening gap between their lives and hers. Now, homeless and alone, Emma faced the coldest months of the year, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the fragile shelter she had found in the woods. The forest was merciless, but it was also quiet. And in its silence, she found a semblance of peace. A pause from the relentless judgment and indifference of the world she had fled. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, tattered notebook, its pages filled with scrawled notes and half-formed plans. It was a journal she had kept since the day Caleb left, a place to pour out her fears and hopes when no one else would listen. She flipped through the pages, hands trembling slightly, stopping at a passage she had written just days before finding the cabin. "I am tired," the words read, "but I am not broken. I will find a way. For the baby. For me." The ink had smudged in places, blurred by tears or rain, but the determination behind the words still shone through. Emma traced the letters with a finger, drawing strength from the resolve they contained. Her thoughts turned to the baby growing inside her, a tiny, fragile life that depended entirely on her. The doctors had warned her of the risks involved in carrying the child without proper medical care, but the alternatives had been terrifyingly few. She had missed appointments, skipped medications, and dodged social workers who asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. The fear of losing her child was a constant shadow, a weight she bore silently beneath her worn clothes. Despite everything, Emma clung to the hope that this child could be the catalyst for change, the reason to fight harder, to endure longer. She imagined a future where she could hold her baby in a warm home, where the past's mistakes were just echoes and not chains. The vision was fragile, like the flickering flame in the cabin's fireplace, but it was enough to keep her moving forward, Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise outside. The snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves disturbed. Emma's heart leapt into her throat as she pressed her back against the cold wall, eyes wide in the dim light. The forest was no stranger to visitors, and in her vulnerable state, every sound was a potential threat. She held her breath, listening intently, the baby stirring inside her as if sensing her fear. After a tense moment, the noise faded into the night, leaving only the whispering wind and the distant call of an owl. Emma exhaled slowly, willing herself to calm. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and settled back against the wall, the ache in her body a dull reminder of her precarious situation. Memories surfaced of the early days after leaving the apartment, the nights spent in shelters too crowded and noisy, the days wandering city streets searching for warmth and safety. She remembered the kindness of strangers, brief and fleeting, and the cold stares of those who judged her for her circumstances. Each experience had chipped away at her confidence, but also hardened her resolve to survive. The cabin offered more than just shelter. It was a symbol of resilience, a place where she could gather her scattered strength. She thought of the lavender scent, the faint trace of someone else's presence long ago, and wondered about the lives that had come before hers in this forgotten refuge. Perhaps, she mused, others had sought sanctuary here too, carrying their own burdens and hopes. As darkness deepened, Emma reached for a small bundle of twigs she had gathered earlier. With trembling fingers, she coaxed a spark to life, the tiny flame growing to cast a warm glow that chased away the shadows. The fire's crackle was a small comfort, a heartbeat in the silence. She sat close, letting the warmth seep into her chilled bones, and closed her eyes for a moment. Envisioning the child she hoped to cradle soon. In the quiet, Emma whispered a promise to the unborn life within her. She would protect you, find a way to keep you safe, no matter the cost. The words felt fragile in the stillness, but they carried the weight of a mother's fierce love. The cabin, with its peeling walls and dusty corners, had become a sanctuary not just for her body, but for her spirit. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, delicate and silent, settling softly on the forest floor. Emma watched them through the small window, a gentle smile touching her lips despite the cold and uncertainty. The road ahead was daunting, the nights long and unforgiving. But here, in this humble shelter, she found the flicker of hope that had eluded her for so long. Her journey was only beginning, but for the first time in weeks, Emma felt a quiet strength rising within her, a determination to face whatever came next, for herself and for the child she carried. The forest, the cabin, the night, all bore witness to this fragile moment of resolve, a seed planted in the heart of winter's chill. The morning light filtered weakly through the grimy window panes, dust motes swirling in the pale beams like tiny ghosts dancing through the stale air. Emma stirred on the creaking wooden floor, the fire reduced to glowing embers that cast a faint warmth across the cabin's worn interior. Her body ached, every muscle stiff from the hard ground, every movement a reminder of the fragile life growing inside her. Yet despite the discomfort, a quiet determination settled over her as she rose slowly to her feet. The cabin's sparse furnishings offered little comfort. A rickety table, a single chair with a missing leg, and a battered shelf nearly swallowed by dust. Emma's fingers traced the rough grain of the tabletop, searching for something, anything, that might help her understand this place she had stumbled upon. The faint scent of lavender lingered, a trace of a life once lived here, whispering secrets she had yet to uncover. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on a loose floorboard near the far wall. It was oddly out of place, slightly raised and worn at the edges as if it had been disturbed recently or purposefully left accessible. Emma's curiosity flickered to life, pushing back the fatigue that tugged at her limbs. She knelt, pressing her palms against the wood, testing its resistance. The board shifted with a soft creak, revealing a small, dark cavity beneath. Her breath caught as she reached inside, fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. Pulling it free, she uncovered a rusty key, its ornate handle tarnished but intact. Emma turned it over carefully, the weight of the object surprising in her palm. It was old, certainly, but it felt significant, as if it belonged to the cabin's hidden history, a key to secrets waiting to be unlocked. Driven by a surge of hope, she began searching the cabin for a lock that might fit. Minutes stretched as she examined every door, drawer, and panel, the key jingling softly in her hand. Finally, in the corner opposite the fireplace, she spotted a small, locked box perched atop the shelf. Its wood was weathered, the iron latch rusted but unbroken. Heart pounding, Emma slid the key into the lock, twisting gently. The mechanism resisted briefly before yielding with a faint click. Inside the box lay a bundle of faded letters tied with a brittle ribbon and a photograph yellowed with age. Emma's fingers trembled as she lifted the letters out, the paper fragile beneath her touch. The photograph showed a woman standing in front of a similar cabin, her expression solemn but resolute, eyes that seemed to hold stories untold. She unfolded the top letter, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was delicate yet purposeful, a voice from the past reaching across decades. The letter spoke of hope amid hardship, of a woman named Margaret who had lived in this very cabin many years ago. Margaret's words revealed a life marked by isolation and struggle, yet threaded with a fierce determination to endure. Emma sat back against the wall, the letters spread on her lap like a fragile bridge connecting her to a stranger's past. The scent of lavender, now more poignant, seemed to fill the room with a bittersweet comfort. She read on, the letters telling of Margaret's pregnancy, her fears and dreams, and the quiet strength she found in the solitude of the woods. The discovery stirred something deep within Emma, a kinship that transcended time. Here was another woman who had faced the unknown with nothing but courage and hope, whose story echoed her own in ways both poignant and profound. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a vessel of history, a silent witness to lives intertwined by circumstance and resilience. As the morning light grew stronger, Emma's resolve solidified. She tucked the letters carefully back into the box and placed it beside her, a treasure to be guarded. The box and its contents were more than relics. They were a testament to survival, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could take root. The cabin, with its creaking walls and whispered past, had become a sanctuary not just for her body, but for her spirit. Emma's thoughts flickered to the future, the uncertain days ahead, the challenges she would face as her pregnancy advanced. But now, she carried with her the strength of Margaret's legacy, a quiet but unyielding flame that promised she was not alone. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the branches and sending a fresh wave of cold through the forest. Emma rose, stretching her stiff limbs, and moved to the small fireplace. She gathered dry twigs and kindling from the corner, her hands steady despite their chill. Striking a spark, she coaxed the fire back to life, the flames flickering and growing, filling the cabin with gentle warmth. The crackling firelight illuminated the letters once more, casting their shadows on the wooden walls as Emma settled back down. She traced the edges of the photograph, imagining the life of the woman who had come before her. The battles fought in silence, the dreams nurtured in solitude. The cabin was a repository of stories, and now Emma was part of that lineage, a chapter unfolding amid the ancient trees and fading light. Her mind wandered to the small community beyond the forest. Faces blurred by distance and time, but real nonetheless. She thought of the park ranger she had glimpsed weeks ago, a kind stranger who had offered a smile when the world had been cold. She wondered if help might come, or if she would have to face the coming winter alone, wrapped in the fragile cocoon of this cabin and the stories it held. The day wore on, the fire crackling softly as Emma read and reread the letters, piecing together fragments of a life that mirrored her own in unexpected ways. The cabin, once a place of desolation, now felt alive with memory and possibility, a refuge where past and present converged in quiet strength. As dusk began to fall, Emma rose again, the weight of her pregnancy pressing heavily on her body. She moved to the small window, brushing away grime to peer out at the gathering shadows. The forest stretched endlessly beyond, dark and mysterious, but within the cabin's walls, a fragile light endured. She whispered a promise to herself and to the unborn child she carried, that she would seek the truth hidden in these letters, that she would honor the woman who came before, and that she would find a way to build a future from the fragments of the past. The key, the letters, the photograph, they were more than artifacts. They were a lifeline, a beacon in the cold. Emma sank back onto the floor, the fire's warmth wrapping around her like a fragile shield against the night. The cabin's silence was no longer empty, but filled with the echoes of hope and resilience, a quiet testament to the strength of women bound by circumstance and courage. As darkness deepened, Emma closed her eyes, the letters resting beside her like a whispered promise. The journey ahead was uncertain, but in this forgotten cabin, amid the fading light and whispered stories, she had found a flicker of hope, a beginning born from discovery, and the first step toward a future she dared to imagine. The days that followed were marked by quiet mornings and long evenings spent beneath the flickering glow of the fireplace, Emma poring over the fragile letters she had uncovered. Each word felt like a thread, weaving her into the fabric of Margaret's life. A woman she had never met, yet whose courage and struggles resonated deeply within her own heart. The cabin, once merely a shelter from the biting cold, had transformed into a portal bridging past and present, a repository of stories waiting to be uncovered and understood. Margaret's letters chronicled a life shaped by hardship and solitude. She had lived decades earlier, in a time when the world beyond the forest was changing rapidly. Yet her existence remained tethered to this small cabin and the woods that surrounded it. Emma read of Margaret's pregnancy, the hope she clung to despite the isolation, and the fears that crept in during long, lonely nights. The words were raw and intimate, a testament to a woman's resilience in the face of uncertainty. As Emma traced the faded ink, she felt an unexpected kinship. Here was a woman who had faced the unknown with nothing but determination and quiet strength, a reflection of her own journey. Margaret's voice reached across the years, offering comfort and courage when Emma most needed it. The letters spoke of dreams for the unborn child, a longing for safety and love, and a steadfast refusal to be defined by circumstance. Motivated by this newfound connection, Emma resolved to learn more about Margaret's story beyond the fragile pages before her. The small town nearby, with its aging library and dusty archives, seemed a world away from the forest's stillness, but it promised answers and a deeper understanding. She pictured the librarian, perhaps a guardian of forgotten tales, and felt a flicker of hope that her solitary search might find allies. Bundling herself against the growing cold, Emma made her way out of the cabin one crisp morning, the air sharp and invigorating. The forest path was carpeted with fallen leaves, their rich hues of amber and crimson rustling underfoot. As she approached the outskirts of town, the familiar sounds of life, distant voices, the hum of engines, the chime of a bell, greeted her like a distant promise of community and warmth. The library was an old brick building, its facade weathered by time but dignified. Inside, the scent of aged paper and polished wood surrounded Emma as she stepped through the heavy doors. Rows upon rows of books stretched before her, silent witnesses to countless stories and histories. She approached the front desk, where a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes looked up from her desk. "I'm looking for information about a woman named Margaret," Emma began, hesitating as she pulled the photograph from her pocket. "She lived here, or nearby, many years ago. I found some letters in a cabin in the woods." The librarian smiled gently, her fingers tracing the edges of the photograph. "Margaret Frances Jones," she said softly. "I've heard that name before. She was a remarkable woman, though much of her story has been pieced together from fragments. Come with me." Emma followed the librarian through aisles and into a small reading room, where an assortment of faded documents and old newspapers lay spread across the table. Together, they sifted through the archives, birth records, census data, and local histories, each piece adding clarity to Margaret's life. Emma learned that Margaret had indeed lived alone in the cabin during the late 1800s, a time when women faced immense challenges simply by virtue of their gender. The records revealed that Margaret had been an unwed mother, a fact that had subjected her to judgment and isolation from the nearby community. Yet, the letters and accounts portrayed her not as a victim, but as a woman of fierce independence who had carved out a life on her own terms. Emma's heart swelled with admiration as she uncovered tales of Margaret's resourcefulness. How she tended a small garden, hunted in the forest, and crafted tools and clothing to survive. One newspaper clipping caught Emma's eye, a story about a local man named William Harrison, a prominent figure who had publicly dismissed Margaret's contributions to the community. The article hinted at a rivalry, with Harrison undermining Margaret's efforts and claims, erasing her work from official records. The injustice echoed painfully with Emma, stirring a fire within her to honor Margaret's legacy. As the afternoon light waned, Emma and the librarian discussed ways to preserve and share Margaret's story. The librarian suggested connecting with a local historian, someone who might help bring the woman's life into the light, restoring her place in the town's history. Emma felt a wave of gratitude and determination. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming a forgotten voice and ensuring it would not be lost again. Leaving the library, Emma carried the weight of new knowledge alongside a renewed sense of purpose. The town bustled around her, its streets alive with stories old and new. But her focus remained on the woman who had lived and loved in the shadows of history. Margaret's resilience had become a beacon, guiding Emma through the uncertainty of her own path. Back in the cabin, Emma placed the letters and documents carefully on the table, the lavender scent mingling with the faint aroma of aged paper. She traced the edges of the photograph once more, imagining Margaret's life in vivid detail. The hardships faced, the quiet victories won, and the enduring hope for a better future. The connection between their stories deepened, binding two women across time by shared strength and unspoken understanding. As night fell, Emma sat by the fire, the glow illuminating her face as she whispered thanks to the woman who had unknowingly become her guide. The letters had revealed more than history. They had opened a door to healing and resilience. In the quiet cabin, surrounded by the echoes of the past, Emma felt a growing resolve to carry Margaret's story forward, not just as a memory, but as a living testament to the power of hope and perseverance. With the baby stirring gently within her, Emma knew that her journey was far from over. Yet, armed with the knowledge of Margaret's courage and the support of newfound allies, she faced the future with a heart fuller and stronger than before. The cabin was no longer a mere refuge. It was a sanctuary of stories, a place where the past and present converged to forge a path toward hope. The morning sun filtered softly through the cabin window, casting warm golden hues over the worn wooden floor. Emma sat at the small table, the weathered letters and newspaper clippings spread before her, like a fragile map leading deeper into Margaret's life. The discoveries at the library had stirred something within her, a yearning not only to understand the woman's past, but to connect with the living world beyond the forest's edge. She knew she couldn't do it alone. As the chill of the autumn air crept in through the cracks of the cabin, Emma wrapped a threadbare shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The forest was alive with a rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds preparing for their migration. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, a stark contrast to the sterile emptiness she'd endured in the city's cold shelters. Today, she was determined to seek out help, to find someone who might accompany her on this unfolding journey. Her steps led her along the leaf-strewn path toward the small town she had glimpsed weeks before. The streets were quiet in the early morning. Shop fronts still shuttered and the occasional figure hurrying by, wrapped against the cold. As she approached the edge of town, a man in a dark green uniform came into view, standing beside a weathered wooden sign that marked the entrance to the nearby park. His face was lined with age, but softened by a warm, curious expression. "Morning," he greeted her, his voice steady yet gentle. Emma hesitated, then offered a small smile. "Morning. I'm Emma. I've been staying in an old cabin out in the woods. I found some letters and papers about a woman named Margaret who lived there long ago. I was wondering if you might know anything about the area, or if there's someone who could help me learn more." The man nodded thoughtfully. "I'm Jack, a park ranger. I've been here for years. That cabin's been empty for a long time, but it's known to some locals. Margaret Jones, you say? That name rings a bell. She's part of the area's older history, though not many know the full story." Emma's heart quickened. "I've found letters, her own words. But I want to understand more, connect the dots. Maybe even share her story." Jack glanced toward the forest, then back to her with a steady gaze. "It's not often we get visitors with such purpose. I'd be glad to help. There are town records, oral histories, folks around here who remember the tales passed down. If you're willing, I can introduce you." Relief warmed Emma's chest. The thought of having an ally, someone familiar with the land and its secrets, gave her a fragile hope. "I'd like that very much," she said softly. Over the next several days, Emma and Jack met regularly, sometimes in the town's modest library, other times at the park office surrounded by maps and photographs. Jack shared stories he'd gathered from locals, tales of Margaret's resilience and the hardships she endured as a single mother, in a time when such a life was met with suspicion and scorn. Each story added color and texture to the faded letters Emma had found, transforming Margaret from a distant figure into a woman of flesh and blood. Jack told Emma about the community's complicated relationship with Margaret. While some had offered quiet support, many others had turned away, influenced by prejudices and the rigid social codes of the era. Emma felt a pang of sorrow, recognizing parallels with her own struggles. Yet the stories also revealed acts of kindness. A neighbor who left firewood at the cabin's doorstep, a schoolteacher who discreetly sent supplies, small gestures that had made Margaret's survival possible. One afternoon, they visited the town's historical society, where a modest collection of artifacts and photographs chronicled the area's past. Emma ran her fingers over the faded images, searching for traces of Margaret's presence. A photograph caught her eye. A faded portrait of a woman standing proudly beside the cabin, her eyes steady and determined. Emma recognized the same photograph she had found in the box, now preserved behind glass. Jack smiled gently. That's Margaret. She was tougher than most gave her credit for. Her story deserves to be told, not buried. Encouraged by Jack's support, Emma began to speak openly about her own situation. The challenges of homelessness, the isolation of pregnancy without a stable home, and the fear that shadowed her every step. Jack listened without judgment, sharing his own experiences of hardship and loss. Their conversations forged a bond, a mutual understanding that transcended their different lives. Together, they devised a plan to bring Margaret's story to the community's attention. Jack suggested organizing a small exhibit at the local community center, showcasing the letters, photographs, and artifacts they had gathered. Emma agreed, envisioning a space where Margaret's life could inspire others, especially women like herself, caught in the margins of society. As the days shortened and winter's breath edged closer, Emma felt a growing sense of belonging. The forest cabin was still her refuge, but the town, with its stories and people, was becoming a place of connection and hope. The fragile threads of her life were weaving into a tapestry of support and purpose. One evening, as they packed materials for the exhibit, Emma looked at Jack with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in this and in me." Jack shook his head, a faint smile creasing his weathered face. "You're the one bringing her story back. I'm just here to help keep the fire burning." That night, back in the quiet cabin, Emma sat by the firelight, the flickering flames reflecting in her eyes. The letters lay open on the table, their words no longer a solitary whisper, but part of a chorus of voices rising from the past. She imagined Margaret's spirit watching over her, a guardian through time, and found strength in the connection. Her hand rested gently on her belly, feeling the subtle movements of the life within. The path ahead remained uncertain, but with newfound allies and the legacy of a woman who had faced adversity with unwavering courage, Emma felt ready to face whatever came next. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees, carrying the promise of winter and the quiet resilience of those who endure. Within the cabin's humble walls, a story was unfolding, one of survival, connection, and the enduring power of hope across generations. The first whispers of winter had settled over the town, coating rooftops with frost and turning the breath of passers-by into fleeting clouds in the cold air. Emma stood outside the cabin, her hands tucked deep into the pockets of her threadbare coat, watching as the forest's edge shimmered with icy crystals. The warmth of the fire inside was a fragile comfort against the encroaching chill. But the weight pressing on her chest was not just the cold. It was the growing sense of unease that had crept in alongside the season. In recent days, the quiet sanctuary she had found in the cabin had begun to feel less secure. Word had spread through the small town and surrounding community that someone was living in the abandoned cabin, stirring whispers among neighbors and drawing the attention of local authorities. Emma had sensed the shift before the knock came. A sharp, unexpected sound on the weathered door that jolted her from a restless sleep. When the social worker arrived, her expression was a mixture of concern and formality. Her voice measured as she explained the dangers of living in an unheated, isolated cabin during the harsh winter months. The warnings were laced with urgency, a litany of risks to both Emma and her unborn child, from exposure and illness to lack of medical care. Emma listened, the words swirling around her like the cold wind outside. But beneath her polite nods lay a stubborn refusal. She knew the risks better than anyone. She had felt the biting cold seep into her bones on countless nights, had counted the days until the baby's arrival with a mix of hope and dread. But the thought of leaving the cabin, the only place where she had felt even the faintest sense of safety and control, was terrifying. The streets and shelters offered little refuge, and the judgment she faced there was suffocating. The social worker's warnings were accompanied by offers of assistance, temporary housing, prenatal care, support services. But Emma's heart recoiled at the thought of surrendering her fragile independence. She feared losing the connection to the cabin and the legacy it held, the link to Margaret's story that had become a lifeline in her darkest moments. As the days passed, the pressure increased. Town officials made visits, their tone more insistent, their presence a reminder that the cabin's walls could not shield her forever. Neighbors, once indifferent, now watched with wary eyes, their whispers carrying through the chilly air like a gathering storm. Emma felt the walls closing in, the sanctuary becoming a cage. One afternoon, as the wind howled outside and snowflakes began to fall, Emma sat by the fire, her hands resting on her swollen belly. The letters from Margaret lay open before her, their faded ink telling tales of endurance and hope in the face of isolation. Yet even Margaret had not faced the scrutiny of a modern world quick to judge and slow to understand. The knock came again, this time accompanied by voices raised in concern. Emma opened the door to find Jack, the park ranger, and a social worker standing together. Jack's face was lined with empathy, his voice calm as he spoke. "We're here to help, Emma," he said gently. "But they're worried about you and the baby. This cabin isn't safe, especially with winter settling in." Emma's eyes filled with tears, the weight of their concern mingling with her own fears. She wanted to believe in the help offered, but the scars of rejection and abandonment ran deep. The thought of surrendering her sanctuary felt like losing a part of herself. Jack reached out, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We want to find a way that works for you, that keeps you safe without taking away your dignity." Her gaze drifted to the window, where snowflakes spiraled down in silent descent, blanketing the world in white. The forest beyond seemed both beautiful and indifferent, a reminder of the fragility of her situation. That night, Emma lay awake, the fire's dying embers casting flickering shadows across the cabin walls. The voices outside, the knocks and footsteps, echoed in her mind. She thought of the baby growing within her, of the future she desperately wanted to protect. The cabin had been her refuge, but now it felt like a battleground. In the quiet darkness, she whispered a promise, to herself and to the child she carried, that she would find a way through the storm. The struggle was no longer just for survival, but for the right to be seen, to be heard, and to hold on to the fragile sanctuary that had become her lifeline. As winter deepened and the world outside grew colder and more unforgiving, Emma faced the mounting pressure with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. The sanctuary she had carved out in the woods was under threat, but within her burned a quiet fire, a resilience inherited from the woman whose letters had lit her path. The days ahead promised challenges and uncertainties, but Emma was resolved to fight for the fragile hope she had found, to protect the life growing inside her, and to honor the legacy of strength and survival that had come before. The cold had settled like a weight over the forest, the first heavy snowflakes thickening the ground beneath Emma's feet as she made her way back to the cabin. Each step was slower now, her body burdened not only by the growing child within, but by the mounting tension that clung to her like frost on the bare branches. The winter's grip was tightening, and with it, the urgency of her situation pressed ever harder. Inside the cabin, the fragile warmth from the fire offered little comfort against the chill that crept through the worn walls. Emma wrapped a threadbare shawl tightly around her shoulders, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she settled near the hearth. The flickering flames cast long shadows that danced across the room, illuminating the small space where she lived in uneasy solitude. It was then that she noticed the loose panel near the corner of the cabin, a remnant she had overlooked in earlier days. With trembling hands, she pried it open, revealing a narrow cavity behind the wall. Nestled within was a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and softened by time. Her fingers hesitated before reaching inside, the weight of discovery heavy in the quiet room. Opening the journal, Emma's eyes scanned the delicate handwriting, the ink faded but still legible. The pages revealed Margaret's innermost thoughts, painful secrets born in the dark of night, sorrows that had never found a voice beyond these walls. There were entries chronicling loss and betrayal, moments when hope seemed lost beneath the relentless cold of isolation. Yet woven through the anguish was a thread of resilience, a steadfast belief in a future beyond the pain. Margaret wrote of plans for her child, hopes for a life unburdened by the mistakes of the past. The words resonated deeply with Emma, each sentence a bridge connecting their shared struggles across time. As she read, a sudden noise startled her, a faint scraping at the cabin door, hurried and desperate. Emma's heart leapt into her throat as she rose cautiously, the journal clutched tightly to her chest. She moved toward the door, peering through the frosted window to find a shadowy figure retreating into the forest. Fear and suspicion rippled through her, the realization that her fragile sanctuary was not as secure as she had hoped. The next days were a blur of tension and vigilance. Emma and Jack, the park ranger who had become her steadfast ally, worked together to safeguard the cabin. Jack helped reinforce the door and windows, while Emma gathered extra supplies to prepare for the harsh winter ahead. Their partnership was a fragile shield against the mounting threats that lurked beyond the trees. Despite the growing danger, Emma found solace in the journal's pages. Margaret's words became a balm for her restless mind, a reminder that survival was not merely endurance, but an act of defiance against the forces that sought to erase them. The journal spoke of dreams that transcended hardship, of a mother's love that refused to be silenced. One evening, as a fierce wind howled outside and snow hammered against the cabin walls, Emma sat beside the fire with the journal open before her. Jack had stepped outside to check the perimeter, his presence a reassuring anchor amid the storm's fury. The baby stirred within her, a gentle movement that steadied her racing thoughts. Suddenly, the cabin was plunged into darkness, the fire extinguished by a sudden draft that swept through the cracked chimney. Emma's breath caught as the cold rushed in, the shadows deepening into an oppressive silence. She fumbled for matches, but found none, her fingers trembling with urgency and fear. The wind howled louder, rattling the cabin's fragile walls as Emma wrapped herself in the shawl, clutching the journal like a lifeline. The storm outside was relentless, a reminder of the precariousness of her existence. Yet within the darkness, she found a strange clarity, a fierce determination to endure, to protect the life growing inside her against all odds. When Jack returned, his face etched with concern, Emma shared her fears and the discovery of the journal. Together, they talked late into the night, planning how to face the challenges ahead. Jack's calm presence was a steadying force, his knowledge of the forest and its dangers a crucial ally in Emma's fight for survival. As winter deepened, Emma's strength was tested in ways she had never anticipated. The cabin, once a refuge, became a battleground where every creak and shadow carried the weight of potential threats. Yet, amidst the hardship, the bond between Emma and Jack grew, forged in shared purpose and quiet resolve. The Eckerhaus journal remained a constant companion, its pages a testament to the resilience of women who had come before. Emma read Margaret's words aloud during long nights, drawing courage from the echoes of a past that refused to be forgotten. The stories of survival and hope intertwined with her own, creating a tapestry of strength that enveloped the small cabin. Each day brought new challenges: the biting cold, the isolation, the looming threat of eviction. But Emma faced them with a quiet courage born from connection and determination. The baby within her moved with increasing strength, a beacon of life amidst the bleakness of winter. As the season wore on, Emma understood that her journey was not solitary. She carried the legacy of Margaret's love and resilience, the support of newfound allies, and the fierce hope that life, even in the harshest conditions, could endure and flourish. The cabin, battered but standing, held the stories of two women bound by time and struggle. Within its walls, amidst the cold and shadows, Emma prepared to face whatever the future held, armed with the strength of the past and the promise of new life. The night had fallen thick and heavy over the forest, snow blanketing the ground in a silent, unyielding shroud. Inside the cabin, the air was dense with anticipation and fear, the flickering glow of a single candle casting trembling shadows on the worn walls. Emma's breaths came shallow and ragged, each one a fragile thread holding her together as the relentless contractions gripped her body. The baby was coming, sudden, fierce, and unstoppable. Jack moved swiftly but carefully, his presence steady and reassuring as he helped Emma navigate the storm raging both outside and within. The wind battered the cabin's fragile frame, shaking the windows and rattling the door. But inside, a determined calm settled between them. His hands were firm yet gentle, offering support as Emma fought through the pain, her eyes reflecting both agony and fierce resolve. Amidst the chaos, Emma's mind drifted, as if reaching across time and space to the woman whose legacy had carried her this far. Margaret's words from the hidden journal echoed softly in her memory. The promises of hope, the strength in solitude, the unwavering love for a child yet to be born. It was as if Margaret herself sat beside her in the dim light, lending courage through the darkest hours. The labor stretched on, a relentless tide that ebbed and flowed with merciless rhythm. Emma gritted her teeth, drawing on every ounce of strength as Jack whispered words of encouragement, his calm voice a lifeline in the storm. The cabin, battered by winter's fury, became a sanctuary not just of shelter, but of endurance and life. Finally, as the night edged toward dawn, a cry pierced the stillness, a fragile, urgent sound that filled the room with raw, overwhelming emotion. Emma's tears mingled with exhaustion and relief as she held her newborn close, the tiny life nestled against her chest, a beacon of hope and renewal. The baby's warmth seeped into her skin, a quiet reassurance amid the cold and uncertainty. Jack wrapped them both in a worn blanket, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he marveled at the small miracle before him. Outside, the storm continued to howl, but within the cabin, a profound stillness settled, broken only by the gentle breaths of mother and child. As Emma cradled her daughter, she reached toward the journal that lay on the table, fingers trembling as she opened to the final pages. There, she found a letter addressed to Margaret's own unborn child. A message of love, resilience, and hope, penned in fading ink. The words spoke across time, a testament to the enduring bond between mothers separated by decades, yet united in their courage. Emma read aloud softly, the candlelight flickering as her voice wove the letter's heartfelt promises into the night. The connection between past and present deepened, the legacy of survival and love enfolding her in a warm embrace. In that moment, the cabin was more than wood and stone. It was a vessel of stories, a cradle of life and memory. The storm outside gradually softened, the first light of morning breaking through the snow-laden branches. Emma looked down at her daughter's peaceful face, a fragile smile touching her lips despite the weariness that clung to her bones. She whispered a name, one that honored the woman whose strength had guided her through the darkest hours. As the day dawned, the cabin filled with a quiet hope that transcended the cold and isolation. Emma's journey, once marked by fear and uncertainty, had given way to a new beginning, a testament to resilience, love, and the unbreakable ties that bind generations. In the soft glow of morning, mother and child rested, surrounded by the echoes of the past and the promise of a future forged through courage and connection. The legacy of Margaret lived on, carried forward in the tiny hands Emma held close, a story of survival continuing to unfold against the relentless march of time. News of Emma's story spread swiftly through the small town, carried on whispers and shared glances that soon blossomed into conversations in cafes, at the general store, and within the walls of the local community center. The tale of the woman who had found refuge in the forgotten cabin, who had uncovered the letters and journal of Margaret, a woman whose struggles echoed across generations, captivated hearts and stirred empathy in a place often slow to change. Local reporters arrived, notebooks in hand, eager to capture the poignant narrative of survival, resilience, and the quiet strength that had brought Emma through the harshest winter. At first, Emma was hesitant, wary of the spotlight and the intrusion into her fragile sanctuary. But with Jack by her side, offering steady support, she agreed to share her journey, not just her own, but Margaret's, and the countless untold stories of women who had been overlooked and forgotten. A press conference was organized in the modest town hall, filled with curious faces and sympathetic eyes. Emma stood before the crowd, her newborn daughter wrapped snugly in a blanket cradled in her arms. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of years of hardship and hope as she recounted her discovery of the letters, the legacy of Margaret, and the harsh realities faced by homeless pregnant women in their community. She spoke not only of survival, but of the urgent need for recognition and support, of the courage it took to seek shelter and dignity in a world too quick to dismiss those on the margins. The audience listened intently, moved by the depth of her story and the connection it forged between past and present struggles. Professor Marcus Chen, a local historian who had joined Emma and Jack in researching Margaret's life, presented evidence of how Margaret's contributions had been systematically erased by those in power, including William Harrison, who had claimed credit for inventions and ideas that were Margaret's alone. His meticulous research underscored the injustice, igniting a broader conversation about the erasure of women's achievements throughout history. The media coverage that followed brought national attention, drawing advocates and organizations eager to support Emma and others like her. The conversation expanded beyond the town, highlighting the intersection of homelessness, pregnancy, and the fight for recognition faced by countless women across the country. Back in the cabin, now cleaned and fortified with the help of volunteers, Emma worked tirelessly to transform the space into a museum and educational center dedicated to Margaret's legacy and the stories of women who had been marginalized. The cabin became a hub for community gatherings, workshops, and outreach programs, a beacon of hope and empowerment. Emma's days were filled with the challenges of motherhood, activism, and healing. Each step forward a testament to resilience, born from shared struggle and newfound allies. She found strength in the support of her community and in the knowledge that Margaret's story, once hidden in faded letters, now shone brightly as a symbol of perseverance and justice. At a public ceremony marking the opening of the museum, Emma stood before a crowd of supporters, her daughter by her side. She shared Margaret's story once more, her voice steady and proud, honoring the woman whose courage had paved the way. The museum's walls bore photographs, letters, and artifacts that told a powerful narrative of survival, determination, and the fight for recognition. The event was more than a celebration. It was a call to action, a reminder that history must remember all voices, especially those silenced by time and prejudice. Emma's journey became a rallying point for change, inspiring others to seek justice and create spaces where stories, like Margaret's and her own, could be heard and valued. As the crowd dispersed, Emma held her daughter close, feeling the weight and promise of the legacy they carried together. The cabin, once a forgotten relic, had blossomed into a sanctuary of hope and remembrance, a testament to the enduring power of connection across generations. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Emma faced it with a heart strengthened by community, purpose, and the knowledge that she was part of a larger story, one that honored the past while forging a path toward a more just and compassionate future. Months later, the cabin stood transformed, a modest beacon nestled at the forest's edge, its weathered walls restored and adorned with plaques, photographs, and carefully preserved letters. The air around it buzzed with quiet energy as visitors, young and old, filtered through the doors, their faces alight with curiosity and reverence. Emma Collins moved among them with a gentle smile, her newborn daughter wrapped snugly against her chest, a living testament to the legacy that had brought them all here. The museum was more than a collection of artifacts. It was a sanctuary dedicated to Margaret Frances Jones, the woman whose hidden story had kindled a movement. Emma had poured her heart into the project, working alongside volunteers, historians, and community members to ensure that Margaret's life, and the lives of countless women who had been overlooked, were honored and remembered. The space had become a hub for education, inspiration, and healing, where visitors could engage with the past and find courage for their own futures. As Emma guided a group of local schoolchildren through the exhibit, she watched their eyes widen at the faded photographs and delicate letters displayed behind glass. The stories she shared were not just about history, but about resilience, determination, and the power of one woman's voice to echo across time. The children's questions and excitement filled the room with a hopeful energy that warmed Emma's soul. Outside, the forest whispered softly, the trees standing sentinel over the cabin and its stories. Emma felt a deep connection to this place, to the woman who had lived and loved here long ago, and to the community that had rallied around them. Her journey from desperate refuge to purposeful advocate had been shaped by struggle and grace, loss and love. In quiet moments, she would hold her daughter close and whisper stories of Margaret, of the strength passed down through generations of women who had fought to be seen and heard. She named her Elizabeth, in honor of the inventor and mother whose blueprints had once been hidden within the cabin's walls, symbolizing the unbroken chain of courage and innovation. The museum had grown beyond Emma's wildest hopes, attracting visitors from distant places and inspiring new projects aimed at supporting homeless women and mothers-to-be. Partnerships with local organizations provided resources and education, turning the cabin into a beacon of hope and a catalyst for change. Emma balanced motherhood with her work, navigating the challenges of both with a quiet determination. The weight of her past hardships never fully lifted, but they had been transformed into a source of power and purpose. Each day was a step forward, a chance to build a future where her daughter and all children could grow up in a world that valued every voice and every story. During one community event, Emma stood before a crowd gathered in the clearing beside the cabin, her daughter nestled in her arms. She spoke softly but clearly, sharing the story of Margaret Frances Jones and the journey that had brought them here. A journey marked by resilience, love, and the refusal to be erased. The audience listened, rapt and moved, as Emma's words wove a tapestry of past and present, sorrow and hope. The cabin, once abandoned and forgotten, had become a symbol, a testament to the enduring spirit of women who fought quietly for recognition and dignity. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the assembled crowd, Emma looked out at the faces before her and felt a profound sense of peace. The museum was thriving, the community engaged, and her daughter's future unfolding with promise. In that moment, surrounded by the echoes of history and the warmth of new beginnings, Emma understood the power of legacy. The way a single story, once hidden in the shadows, could illuminate a path forward for generations to come. With Elizabeth's soft breaths against her cheek, Emma smiled, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The cabin stood strong, a sanctuary of memory and hope, a beacon for those who would follow. And in the heart of it all, a mother's love burned bright, unwavering, unbreakable, and eternal.